it was possible for me to entertain the idea that, yeah, all of the people that are teaching me economics in Colombia are wrong, and all of their ideas about economics are completely pointless and useless, and they only serve, well, they're useless for society, but they're very useful for the people who pay for them, essentially central banks and the banks that benefit from those things.
But you studied fiat economics, so are you telling us there's nothing of any value that you learned at university?
Yes.
But
I mean, the only value was in learning the things, finding out on your own that they're wrong is kind of valuable, but there are so many better ways of spending 5 years of your life.
And you spent some time even then at a position teaching at university as well. So would you say, I mean, obviously it can be an intelligence issue. Was it an issue of character? Is it just different interests? What makes up the mind of a typical fiat economist?
I think it's simply the way that the education is financed. It comes from central banks. Essentially, all of the universities today are dependent on government funding. It's first of all, governments are the ones that provide the students with the loans and the financing to go to universities. So the universities have to adhere to certain guidelines in order to be eligible for student loans, in order for the students to be able to get loans to get into it. So you have to basically toe the fiat line in order to get your students to get cheap loans. In other words, the real product in the university is not education. The real product is debt slavery. So what the university does is that it presents debt slaves, who are the real products, the students, to the banking system and the fiat system, and teaches them nonsense but gets them indebted for life. So that's one way. The second way is financing of research. So if you want to get funded for your research, there's just no way of succeeding and getting research grants. It's a highly competitive world. There's a very limited number of research grants out there available, and your best chance of getting one is to toe the line. In fact, it's basically impossible not to get one without towing the line. So there's research that shows in monetary economics, practically all published research in monetary economics is financed by the Federal Reserve directly or indirectly. It's very obvious what it is. There is no free market system in education. There is no free marketplace of ideas. Ideas aren't allowed to be discussed freely. Universities can't adopt ideas freely. The way to survive as a university is to not teach things that are useful for students. The way to survive is to present the students as debt slaves for the government and the banking system. And the way to do that is to just continue to propagate these ideas. So that's why you can't get away with teaching Austrian economics in most universities. They have to teach the Keynesian stuff. They have to go through the model of how it's done. And so the system at every stage, from high school to university to graduate school, at every level, it selects for essentially obedience. It selects for people who are willing to close their eyes and say, yep, if you raise aggregate demand, you fix unemployment. If you print money, then you fix all of the world's problems. If you're trying to think critically of things, then you're just not going to make it in academia. The only people that make it are the people who are just going to go along and parrot these lines. And I think, historically, you see a lot of stories of intelligent people who are highly frustrated by academia and who couldn't make it by academia and who left. And they have a lot of bad stories to tell about academia. And generally, I would say, before Bitcoin, there was just no other alternative. If you couldn't make it as an academic in fiat academia, you had to go find another job outside, and you couldn't be publishing, you couldn't be teaching, you couldn't be doing those things properly because there was just no institutional framework to host those things. And I think that's one of the amazing things about Bitcoin, is that it allows somebody like me and a lot of other people to start essentially working outside of that system. I don't want to be part of the university. I left my university job. I don't want to be working for any university anymore. I don't have to write research grants. I don't have to change my, when I was at university trying to get published, the most infuriating thing was to try and dumb down my writing to make it idiotic enough to fit into an academic journal, to try and put in stupid things that make me sound like I could get published in those things, believe in all kinds of nonsense, accept all kinds of ridiculous starting points and assumptions, and then use ridiculous methodologies. You had to do those things to get published in academic papers and journals that nobody reads. But that's the only way to keep your job. Well, now we have a different system because of Bitcoin. You don't have to be dependent on them, and you don't have to be dependent on a constant salary, and you don't have to be dependent on a constant influx of debt, which is how the fiat system works, where you need to constantly be rolling over your debt. So this is really, I think, the intellectual value of Bitcoin, that it is allowing an alternative educational system to succeed, and it's allowing people to just opt out of the fiat system. And so, since leaving university, I've 1000x'd the number of students that I reach through my website, where I teach online courses. I could teach many, many, many more students every year than I could teach back when I was in fiat university.